first and foremost, it's super disappointing Navi don't make the playoff. We can all agree to that. It's the fashion they lose in as well that's disappointing. Throwing, I'd say, 2 games against Falcons and G2. All of them obviously plays a part, but if anything, I think some of the players let them down.
There's other teams out there who can overtake them.
No, I'm actually going to disagree with you on this one. Here's why. Right, we're back at Counterpoints. Obviously, we have just finished stage 3 of the IEM Cologne Major. We're about to start the playoffs. There's a day or two off, actually, which is nice because obviously this major, people don't know like the last one. One of the things they've done, which is kind of a bummer if you do the pick'ems, is you no longer get a day off between the stages. So actually, famously, if the game ever goes till like midnight, then you basically have, as just a fan, you have about sometimes like 10 or 11 hours to make your pick'em. And I can tell you, as a content creator, since we're all trying to do those videos that we put on our YouTube, it's actually mildly stressful, but whatever. You know what? That is one of those areas I have learned over the years. You can't really complain about an esports. Like, you think about all the ways we get to set our own schedule. We watch fucking video games for a living. They do pay us mad money. I basically get paid to insult people for being shit in the game. Like, I can't really then go, one time I do it past bloody midnight. But yeah, just sleep in the next morning till 2 p.m. So whatever, I can't really complain, can it? It's not like I get up at 7 in the morning, go and do back-breaking labour. So I understand. With that said, though, still do have to make time in my day to do this. I have to watch all the games. I have to stay on top of all the esports. I have to read stupid fan opinions. Actually, in some way, we have a concept in England where if you go and work on an oil rig, you get paid extra money because it's called danger work, because you get paid for like the day. It's simply having to expose my mind to my enlightened mind that I've carved out like a fucking palace of wonders over 20 plus years. I have to expose that to young hoodlum, ruffian, 15-year-old kids going, actually, Zero is undisputed the best player. I have to take that into my brain every day. So, you know what, actually, maybe I should be paid for that. So as a result, would you like to support me in my efforts doing so? Well, if so, then why not actually buy this shirt that we have made via our artist, where they've used an abstract image to take all the teams that are the contenders for this major. Spoiler, one of these teams already isn't on here. Certain team, let's just say from Ukraine, what they're represented by, a certain bird. That one's irrelevant. Skip that one. But the rest of them, it's all there. There's a bee on the image. There's different types of falcon, eagle. You can get all. There's a jaguar or a panther. I think it's a panther. I'm not sure. Coming in involved. So you can see where we're going with this. It's an abstract way to show all the teams competing to win the major at IEM Cologne, and it's kind of a cool design. So it's simple. Go to lastfreenation.shop and you can go and purchase one yourself. And there's a bunch of extra details. So first of all, if you are American on the website and you buy more than just this shirt, if you buy $60 or more, you just get free shipping. Actually, we can ship to most countries around the world. It's just obviously the specifics of your case. You'll have to check the website to find out what those are. And this is a limited time offer. At the end of this month, I assume also when stocks run out, we're going to no longer have this shirt. It's like a one-time drop. We're starting to expand out this. And the idea is hopefully we'll do it in the future. Maybe we'll do it in League of Legends. Hopefully do it again for the next major. And we want to make this like a cool tradition. And as I say, it does literally support people who do the shows on LFN. If you don't know, all of our creators who do regular shows, we give like a small amount of equity and we actually get a percentage of everything that's an ad on our specific shows. That's one of the cool ways we do it here. So support your favourite shows like Counterpoints on Last Free Nation directly by purchasing our limited edition Cologne 2026 Major T at www.lastfreenation, all one word, .shop. Check it out. There's also some other Last Free Nation merch on there. Right. Let's also, I'll even just say this. I didn't even decide this. One of the cool things about the Last Free Nation company is because it's basically me doing all my shows, and then Monty originally was doing all his shows as well, but he does the business now. Monty knows which way his bread is buttered, as we say in England. Because I noticed when they did the first drops of like LFN shirts and stuff, some of them had like a rare one that was called the Founders one that was like 50 or something, you know, they're all numbered like 001, 002. I noticed when they sent me them, I didn't tell them to do this, all mine were the 001 ones. So listen, they know what's going on. They know who the number 9 of this team is. They know who the star player is. There's a reason why Ronaldo's my favourite player. And you know what? At this point in my career, I don't run back either. I just wait up here, and when you get a good ball, pass it to me, mate. I'll put it in the net.
Well, which Ronaldo are you talking about? The good one or the fake one?
Well, what's funny is you mean the Brazilian one, all that. But the joke is, I actually think that, by the way, that's even one of the cool things if you want to know about my history with football. I was like everyone. When we were all kids, we all worshipped El Fenomeno or whatever. We all used to say, This guy stole his name. All you need to know now, mate, is people either have to go R9 or they go the real Ronaldo. Well, why do you have to say that, mate? Because the other guy mocked him so hard, as the kids would say, bro, he stole his name. He took his name. He's actually more famous, scored more goals, didn't fucking get injured, probably wasn't doing drugs all night. Well, the difference is he'd probably doing other types of drugs. That just help you play the game, but whatever. We all had our problems. If anything, by the way, also, I will just say this. One thing people don't ever actually credit is, even though I think it's cool, Pimp, to motivate myself every now and then with, some David Goggins, some Kobe Bryant, some Ronaldo. I tell you what though, mate, you wouldn't actually want to live your life like that every day, I'm telling you guys, because I always just think this, like the joke here would be, even though I just made that gag there, because a lot of Brazilian players of that era, Neymar, Adriano, they were all ridiculous partiers, weren't they? They should have been back in the 80s or something, mate. They were like not really being top professional Ronaldinho. In a weird way though, you could actually make the argument that the Brazilian Ronaldo and people like Kobe Bryant, their drug is just going to the gym, mate. They're just actually obsessed with that. I made that joke to you that I actually think in a weird way, what you did is take your obsession for competing and eating food and you just flipped it on its head and you just made it the obsession of like trying to fucking do the most events and then do all the cycling shit in a weird way. It's actually a lot easier to make like friends with your demons. And instead of being like, I've no demons, just be like, set it loose on some shit that's actually positive though. Like in a weird way, that becomes its own obsession, right, Pimp?
Yeah, I guess you're spot on with that one.
Now, here's the thing. I'll tie this in, and this is how you know I'm a professional, Pimp. Because I know someone who's obsessed with Counter-Strike, thinks about it every day for 20 plus years. He's grinding, he's studying all the games. I'll tell you the person I actually feel the most sorry for after this Stage 3 Swiss system. It's got to be Blade from NAVI, bro. Because if you are Blade, think about how many times we've like congratulated him on how amazing his like peaking into big events is and going to majors. And even you think of like the last one, you remember now at the last one, they could have like been in the finals. They weren't even supposed to be at that point. That was when they were still considered like semi-washed, has the Mikaze move worked? And then you think about this season, not only with the Vitality win, they were peaking right at the end of the season as hard as you could. Like, notice how that whole discussion of like, well, they're second, but that's just because no one's good. Like, by the end, that wasn't even true. All the other teams got good, and we still all had NAVI second. So what's wild is, I actually think, not just because they're number 2, but because of the way they've played this season, if there was one team that you could have bet your life on after Vitality should be in the playoffs, it was NAVI, bro, because they were so good against all teams. They had the map pool figured out. Everyone's game was peaking. Think about Wonderful won an MVP at the end. Mikaze looked awesome against everyone except Vitality, so who gives a shit? As long as you don't play Vitality, he's okay. Everyone was looking fucking amazing. And mate, this has been such an underwhelming Stage 3. Like, if you saw it, I feel like a million things I've seen from NAVI didn't happen. Like, first of all, Mikaze was bad. He just had some straight up bad games. Yeah. Then also, I was particularly thinking of this in the Falcons once, because people don't know, Falcons have actually, one of the things about the whole karrigan magic is they have actually sort of lived off winning big rounds and winning overtime sessions and things like that. NAVI's been terrible at those two things, bro. If you put, how many times have I seen them in like a 2vx or a 1v, and they just couldn't do it. Maybe Bit could win the odd one or something like that, but a lot of them, like, I actually genuinely feel like across the board, this team just looked off. This wasn't even just like one bad performance, one map. Something happened. Like, this wasn't the NAVI I saw for most of the season, Pimp.
No, I agree. Even looking at who they faced, I feel like the game against Spirit, obviously the opening game for them, weren't on the server, didn't show up whatsoever. But there was also Spirit coming in hot from Stage 2. Yeah. We've seen what Spirit were able to do. So I'll give them a slight for that one, especially in a Swiss format where you have to lose 3 best of 3s now, with all the games being best of 3s. So that's fine by me. Then they go on to win the next 2 games. Was it against Legacy and the Mongols, I think, easy peasy. And you think, okay, they're back on track, they'll make it. Then that Falcons game, again, I'll give them a freebie in the sense that they should have won that game. There were plenty of moments in that game.
Yeah, absolutely.
They should have won that game, and it went, quadruple overtime or triple overtime on Anubis, and then at the end of the day, Falcons edged it out, So one of those games,
I think at one point it was like 11-7 or 11-6 or something. They were like in really good position,
Something like that, But again, CT side Anubis can be quite tough to close a game out, So there's different things where I'm like, okay, I'll give you a free pass. Then I thought to myself, okay, final game, you get G2.
Yep.
It's going to be a landslide. You're going to beat G2. It may be a couple of close maps, but you'll beat them 2-0, worst case 2-1. When I saw them losing that third map, I was thinking to myself, and very much aligned for what you're saying right here, that's just not NAVI. That's not the NAVI that showed up to this tournament, because they are a team that will beat they'll beat G2 and they'll beat teams beneath them or teams on their own level, and they will occasionally, have that loss against Spirit or occasionally have that loss against Falcons, and they can get away with that, because I feel like in the game against Falcons, they could have won, should have won. However, the game against G2, that's a game they have to win. That's a game where it doesn't matter how well G2 is playing, doesn't matter what kind of version Navi is showing up, it doesn't matter, if any of them had a bad breakfast or whatnot. That's a game that 9 out of 10 times Navi should be winning. So it's mega disappointing, for Navi not to make the playoff. And I think you mentioned it yourself, right? Blade having been a student of the game for so many years. I think one of the most interesting things to see both during the Falcons game, but even more so against G2, was his body language. Like he was always like he was almost laughing in despise, in a sense where it's like he couldn't do shit. First and foremost, he can't react, obviously, because of the stupid coaching rules during the majors. That's one thing, but he was just laughing it off, and he was like, he couldn't believe what he saw. He couldn't believe some of the times that certain players, you mentioned McCarthy, would die to an entry kill where he's just standing behind and he just starts laughing, it's like, and clearly, if you know Blade and what he's thinking about, they're like, this can't be true, It was almost like disbelief in what's unfold in front of him. So I don't know how to wrap it up, but first and foremost, it's super disappointing Navi don't make the playoff. We can all agree to that. It's the fashion they lose in as well that's disappointing. Throwing, I'd say, 2 games against Falcons and G2. I know Alexi B, always a class act, comes out and says it's his responsibility, for not being able to call them into a victory from winning positions. Sure. I don't think that's the case. I think honestly that all of them obviously plays a part, but if anything, I think some of the players let him down, to be completely honest. As you said, McCarthy dropping massively.
It's even mentioned by Blade in his interview after they get eliminated on Mirage against G2. They lost a 5v3 and a 4v2. Like, if you're Lexi B, you did your job, man. People have to shoot them with the guns at the end of the day. I used to say this to MSL back in the day. It's like, mate, if you get the bomb site, on the bomb site with the bomb planted and you have, like, you're not like 2 numbers down, like, you've done your job completely. They have to play the round out.
100%. And to be fair, they even got lucky against G2 on Dust 2, where they were down, was it 12-7 or 11-7? And then Wonderful pulls off a sick 1v4 clutch on the B bomb side. And Nerds had a round, where G2 were in full control, where he decided to push up middle and die against a Tech 9. And all of a sudden it starts to crumble. So in reality, I think Navi should have lost that series 3-0, as dumb as it may sound. But I don't know. For me, it's. I'm sorry they're not part of the playoff, but I'm also excited about the fact they're not part of the playoff from the standpoint that I've taken a couple of times. And I know people, they didn't buy in on the idea. I've flirted this a couple of this segments with Yanko, and I don't think he's fully buying into it, because I think he rightfully so, thinks that Navi was a great team and we needed to give them a bit more time and needs to give this lineup this major to figure it out. But I think this is what's going to make Navi go all in to acquire Frozen. And I think Navi with a Frozen on their lineup is going to be a team that is not only contesting for playoff every single time, that could be a team that could contest Vitality to be the best in the world. I think that's what they need. I think they need one more star stable player within their lineup to make up for the fact that Wonderful at times is a bit inconsistent, that McCarthy is still new to the role of being the star. You can't rely on him, etc., etc. So I'm super sad on behalf of the major, super sad on behalf of the playoff that Navi is not part of it, because I think they are one of the 8 best teams in the world. There's no doubt about it. They're better than 90, they're better than Aurora, you name it. But unfortunately for them, they didn't really play up to that level at this tournament. Thus, they don't deserve to be there. But I do hope the consequence of that is not is not going to waste. And I think that is Navi going all in to acquire Frozen. At least that's what I would do if I were Blade and if I were Navi. And if that's the outcome of them missing the major missing the playoff in the major, then I'm okay with it. But if this means that Navi is like, we're giving it another 6 months because we think that what we showed in Budapest, what we showed leading up to the major here is good enough to build upon, then I'll be a little bit sad, because then it does feel like it's a sacrifice for nothing.
But this way, I'm really sad in the sense that, like, Navi in general over the season matches up against everyone. Like, the reason they're number 2 justifiably is here's the thing, they beat you just playing like ethical CS. They beat you with Counter-Strike and the principles of the game and prep and great calls and great coaching and adjustments and working on new maps like Anubis, etc. And all the things that you basically a bit like my old rant back in the day that I noticed every analyst copied afterwards. But you're all welcome. Where I actually was the one, if you go back, was the first person to tell people don't copy and tell kids to play like Simple, you tell them to play like Device, because there's things you can actually learn from a Device demo that are just about positioning and using your head and not being overly aggressive and taking the shots that are easier and making shots easier. In the same way, I would always tell people, one of the reasons why I love to watch Navi play is, if I ever do a watch party, mate, there's so much to talk about. I can make so many comments on, like, see how they switched that up a bit there after the timeout. You can tell Blade called, a pace change on this attack. There's so many things. When I watch certain other teams play, mate, it's just like, Zantara's banged his head off. Like, what am I talking about there? Like, we all know what the crosshair did. Like, that wasn't some genius interaction with the game. So one of the sad things is I always think like they're a great advertisement for what Counter-Strike is, because I always have to tell people who follow the other games, like I'm obviously friends and do shows with people who do League of Legends. I have to tell them sometimes, understand this. I think the Dom guy's the best player maybe ever, but actually the NAVI team's better than his team, because that's how Counter-Strike works. Like, they have the other roles that balance out better, and they can actually use elements of Counter-Strike. One of the best things about our game, where you can neutralize a star player. Like, I always tell people, if you have a crossfire and a star player, he can only shoot one area at one time. You probably kill him there. If you flash him, you probably kill him. He's blind. Like, it's one of the best things about the game is actually people like Blade can have an impact. But here's the sad thing. If they had made the playoffs, their main job, was to just give a really great game to someone else who then goes on to win the majors. So in a weird way, I agree with you, Pimp, because all season long, if people have noticed, I had like the weird opinion that simultaneously they are number 2. And in theory, when you watch them play Vitality, when they both play their best game, they look like they can almost win the game. But you always felt with NAVI, because so much of it was prep and basically everything about how Team CS works, it always felt to me like to win, they had to be like 9 out of 10 every single time. They can't ever have a bad game. Whereas if we talk about any of the teams here, by the way, actually a bunch of the likes of the Vitalities and Falcons have had plenty of games they weren't 9 out of 10 that they won. They probably had, Falcons have probably had games, mate, where there was 7 out of 10 and won the game somehow. Like, because that's what happens when you have ridiculous players like Monacini, Corky, they can just do bullshit that doesn't even that wasn't in the strat book, that wasn't called. God just fucking spoke through their hands, mate, and they just get to win that game. You have to just tip your hat if you're an opponent. There's nothing to say. So in a weird way, here's why I don't mind it that much. Because one, I don't think they were going to actually win anyway, unfortunately. Like, I think it would have just taken too much for them to win. But two, that ties into what you're saying, Pimp. This is why I actually think there's a second thing can happen at this major that will make it even better if you're an RV fan, which is this. Have any team except Vitality win the major. Like, mate, if Spirit, somehow, let's get crazy. Only I'm going to do this, but let's say, what if Falcons did win it, mate? If someone like Spirit or Falcons wins this major, or Furia, throw them as well, other teams that, you already know their rosters are strong and they're already, in theory, got the potential to do it. If they now win and you're NAVI, bro, you have to upgrade. Because you've already seen in the last season, you can almost do. Like, if it wasn't for this major, I would have said to Blade, mate, that's like a fucking 9 out of 10 coaching job you just did this last season. Look at the pieces you're working with. A lot of people said you should have gambled after the last major and removed Immer or something like that, or whoever they wanted removed. People wanted moves done before NAVI got back up again. So I do think actually what it's shown is the reason also as well is, let's be real, Frozen just sat there. And whenever I do these shows with Luz Raposa, where we look at all these graphs and all these role things, mate, you should see how many times on the graph I'm like, who's that player there? He's like, Frozen. It's like and it's what you said there. Here's the key thing. It's that he's so stable, bro. That's the part that I think, first of all, I think someone like Blade would love to play with a guy like this, mate. It's exactly the sort of player that's built for you. Whereas there are players, maybe the Elisias of the world, where you don't know like what dynamic they'll have on the team environment. They might fit the tactical part, but then if they ever played to your sit, I feel like Frozen would just come in and he'd just do whatever you say. And then more importantly, he's not only stable, and I actually think that what NAVI don't have. They don't have that one star player, bro, that goes off every game. Like, Wonderful can be great, but he can just be all right sometimes. Bit can be really good, but that's some heavy god shit. You don't usually want that being the player that's the best player. You have no idea on the other two. Makasa's looked amazing at some of the events this year. We thought maybe he could be that player. Problem is his playing style's probably too volatile, So I think if you brought in Frozen, you not only added a bit more skill, which I do think they need in their team. Like, I always tell people, one of the respectful things I have towards NAVI is, if I just put this roster into one of those like FIFA type things that give me all stats, there's no way this is a top 3 roster, mate. In fact, I might even be being generous saying that. This is one of those rosters. This is why I'm still, when I look back in time with that GL roster, I'm like, how did they win that major, that first one? And I have to even forget the whole 6 files in a row, whatever. Man. That seems insane that they did that. Like, but it must just be the fucking GOAT. It's unbelievable. Like, that's not like just like Leicester winning. That's like if Leicester had an era like fucking Manchester City. But like, what? Every season they do it. Like, no, that's impossible. That roster should only do it one time ever. So I agree with you. This actually shows, this also why CS is harsh. Nobody in theory, aside from this major, has done a bad job in NAVI. Even people that ever once cut like Immer. You're still a good player, mate. You did a good job. It seems like you fit the system. Yeah. I can believe they're happy with you. You've done. The problem is, though, this is a topic we had like a few episodes ago about NAVI even when they were number 2. It's like, I'm sorry, but when you get to that level, it isn't about just doing your job and being really good. It really is just about, you've got to do everything to get that trophy. That's the one area about what people think you have to appreciate about Falcons, is that they don't just keep traders in the roster if they don't win, that they're eventually like, right, we've got to gamble again, let's get another player. So, like, I actually do think, I'm with you, Pimp, at this point in time, this roster's good. I enjoy watching them play CS, but if you want to see them really threaten these other teams, and actually right now it looks like a bunch of teams are going to be strong next season, it isn't just going to be the Vitality. So you've got to do something. You can't just wait forever.
No, and I think it's also, when we say that, if I hear you right, it's also us acknowledging the fact that it's just a strong call, it's just a strong team that we actually want to see them.
Yeah.
I believe they could be the best team in the world if they made that change. They can definitely contest for that,
Yes.
So it's more so, as you said, like, no one has done poorly. I don't think Emma deserves to be kicked, first and foremost. I think he's even played up to some of his better Counter-Strike during this major, and I wouldn't pinpoint on him, not making the playoff, but he's the most upgradable, so to speak, or he's in a position where you can get a Frozen in instead and upgrade and maybe change a few positions, and then all of a sudden you have a more stable team. So I think it's more so, from at least my point of view, it's more so the fact that I know Blade is a 10 out of 10 coach. I think LXCB is a great in-game leader. I think Wonderful have, in all honesty, the last 6 months he's stepped up, and he's been, close to a superstar. He's never gonna be the same category as Monacy, Dunk, and those guys, but he's just beneath them, at times, and he's found more stability. So he's actually worked that out, because one of the biggest issues I had with Wonderful was him being inconsistent. But the fact of the matter is he's been consistently the best player for quite some time. And I also do think that bringing in a guy like Frozen would then alleviate some of the pressure on McCarthy, because I think this is the direct consequence. As harsh as that may sound, McCarthy having a bad major is also why Navi is not in the playoff.
For sure.
Because don't forget where Navi were before McCarthy started to play well. They were also just the 5th, 6th, 7th best team in the world. They were sometimes getting in the playoffs, sometimes missing it. Then McCarthy started to add a bit more firepower. He grew up and he became a great, solid player for Navi. He's having a bit of a one-off tournament, and instantly Navi is back to being just, 5th, 6th, 7th, and, on the cusp of making the playoff. And this time around, unfortunately, not able to beat Falcons, not able to beat G2. So in that regard, by adding Frozen, I also think you add a bit more stability, and you almost guarantee that no matter how they play, as you said, they can get away with playing 8 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 and still beat teams around their level on any given day. And I think that's even more valuable for a guy like Blade, to have that consistency, to get more experience in the playoffs, to get into more grand finals, and also to build a bit of belief within the team that when then McCarthy is going to have a sick tournament again, which is going to happen probably the next tournament or the following tournament, then we're good enough to win the entire thing, regardless of Vitality playing well, regardless of Spirit playing well, regardless of the fact that Vitality may not have practice leading into a tournament. Because I feel like that's the notion people are sitting back with now. Now we can win tournaments where either Vitality is not present at, or some of the other teams are not playing well. Simple as that. It's never going to be a 10 out of 10 Falcons facing a 10 out of 10 Navi. Well, Falcons are going to win that game, because Falcons 10 out of 10 is better than Navi's 10 out of 10. But I think that could change that dynamic if they brought in a guy like Frozen. And I'll even say it like this, depending on what happens to the other teams in the playoff and contractual situations for other players. Like, Frozen is probably not the only player Navi could go and acquire. And we often speak about it, Duncan, in terms of, is it attractive to join a team like Navi? I think it's super fucking attractive. I think if you're Leash right now, I think unfortunately for him, the window passed. But if you're Leash, like, that would be a dream scenario to join a team like Navi. That would be the dream move. And I think that's the case for a lot of players. Even for some of the G2 guys, a guy like Heavyguard who's performed way above what everyone would have expected, I'm not saying he should replace Bit, but fact of the matter is he's better than Bit at the moment. Yes. And there's even a world to be made where I think Heavyguard could obtain different roles potentially, and free up Bit to then play Emma's roles, which gets more out of Bit, and then you have Heavyguard, who was a better version of Bit, and all of a sudden you have a super strong Navi. So I think there's different ways of going if you're Blade, and I think he's having those, thoughts already, and he probably prepared for it already, knowing Blade. But that's the exciting part to me. It sucks they're not part of the major, but as you said, I also don't think Navi would have won the playoff. If anything, they could have done Falcons a favor, or they could have done Spirit a favor, or Vitality a favor by knocking out one of the good teams, so they don't have to do it. But in terms of going all the way and winning, I don't. As I said, I don't think a Navi playing 10 out of 10 beats. They don't beat Fury at 10 out of 10. They don't beat Falcons 10 out of 10. They don't beat Spirit 10 out of 10. And they sure as hell don't beat Vitality 10 out of 10. They may be the most consistent, which is why they've been the second best team in the world. But when everyone is playing their best player in the Counter-Strike, I think Navi is still just the 4th, 5th best team in the world.
The obvious other name that was even in the mix over the season was Sensu. There's another one. Essentially, all we're asking for is this is one of the reason why I think him is the most replaceable pro, because he plays actually roles that normally you put star players in, and that actually you can have a decent amount of agency, and that's why everyone has to sell that angle of like he's a secondary caller. I'm sorry, like it's not enough then. Even though yes, they're playing beautiful Counter-Strike, like it's like a scaled up version of the karrigan problem. Are his calls actually worth it for what you get from the firepower? In this case, probably not. Because I'm sorry, as we're pointing out here, right, I actually think some of the teams Pimp just listed there play worse Counter-Strike than NAVI, but the difference is when you have more firepower, you get to cheat a little bit. You don't have to always be perfect. Everything doesn't have to be an amazing execution. Like, think about the analogy to sports. Like, in sports, one of the concepts people actually have for superstar players is the idea you create your own shot. Like, think of one of my favourite players, Mohamed Salah, who used to play for Liverpool, right? If you ever watched him play, he even did it at the end of his career, even more hilariously. You know when he had that season last season that was like all the record-breaking numbers? Mate, his physical prime was about 7 years ago when he used to be a terror, you know. But what he learned was, he just learned when the moment was to just turn it on. I think he even said in an interview, all I need is one shot or something. Like, yeah, basically out of the game, he'd be walking half the game, and then he'd just find one moment where he'd just turn in and shoot in the top corner. It's like, if you can do that, you don't have to do all the rest of the things in the game. You don't have to run back. You don't have to link up with the defense. You don't have to create pack. You know what? That wins the game. So that's what Counter-Strike on some level. It's why we all love at the top level all the stars.
Yeah, I think I just want to add to, before I forgot it as well, I also think part of that is that arena Counter-Strike, is a little bit less tactical than group stage Counter-Strike and small arena Counter-Strike. Because in a big arena like in Cologne, where it's going to be 15,000 plus, sound is different first and foremost.
Yeah.
You react a lot to the crowd, it becomes more of a momentum game, becomes more of a reacting to whatever the crowd is giving you. And it's just less tactical from when you're in a controlled environment where you get to control every single aspect, where Blade gets to, first and foremost, react, not being constrained by having handcuffs off doing a major, but also not being in an arena. It's sometimes, I feel like it's a bit of an underrated topic that it is not that structured teams and structured Counter-Strike doesn't work in arenas. That can also kill a team, full of individuals. But there's a case to be made that teams like Falcons, and more momentum-based teams take FaZe Clan as a great example, when they were actually playing well and when they still believed in karrigan. The reason why they went into the Shanghai Major Final, the reason why karrigan with Jacob and Brokey, in bad shape, got all the way to the grand final in Budapest. Counter-Strike that is free flow and momentum based just works a little bit better in an arena because you take some of the controlled environment out of it from the tactics, from the sound, from the working in synergy, working in tandem. That just becomes significantly more difficult when you're inside an arena where the crowd all of a sudden plays a factor, where the noise all of a sudden plays a factor, where the whole stadium is rumbling, at certain times plays a factor. So in that regard, it's also a way for Blade, I'd say, to protect his team a bit more when it comes to the playoff. When you play in big arenas, you play big games, the more stability and the more star power you have, a guy like Frozen, the less prone you are to be affected by that. And I think that is one of the biggest issues for NAVI as well. And one of the issues why I didn't believe that NAVI would have made it all the way to the final, even if they got into the arena in Cologne.
I will say as well, just because this happens every time you have Swiss system, where once you've done the first round, remember, even the first round has that scuffed seeding where it's like one plays 9 or whatever instead of 16, because basically this is actually something Lurpus pointed out many years ago. If you run a normal Swiss system without doing that silly seeding, which is wrong, because obviously 1 should play 16, 2 should play 15, so the first game should be easy. Basically, the problem is if you ever run a simulator, it means the top 8 teams can't get out because eventually one of them has to play each other, like in a game. I think it's like the 2-2 game. So if you do 1 versus 9, even though it's scuffed, it makes it possible somehow for like the actual 8 best teams to get out because how a Swiss works out, right? The reason why I bring this up is, unfortunately, the downside of Swiss is the area it's definitely not perfect is you will get people who have really easy runs and you get people who have really hard runs. So an example would be the team I told you I and ahed about picking to go through. If you take, for example, Aurora played Monty, Spirit, G2 and 9Z. Now, true, you could say Spirit, G2 and 9Z have all made the playoff story. Like, yes, but on paper, those aren't like crazy opponents aside from Spirit, they lost to them. Whereas you go and look, NAVI, if people don't know, all 5 teams they played are top 12 ranked teams right now on HLTV. They had Spirit, Legacy, remember, just had those results recently. They jumped up. Mongols are still around there, even though they weren't good now. Then they lost to Falcons and to G2. And even though, G2's a bit... Same time, though, the point is you never get a game off. There was never an easy game here. There was never the one of like, I'm playing this team now, it's like rookies. Or it's under... So I do think that's also one thing I'll say is they did get a hard road to do it. It's not like they just fucked up against total shitters that nobody... Like, they didn't lose to fucking Bait or something, mate, or Paravision or something. They didn't get humiliated like that. So that part I do think is fine. But it's just... Now's the obvious time. Just rip the Band-Aid off. Just make the big move. You didn't have the results, so you can justify it. And then go forwards. I also think as well, here's the thing where if Blade was listening, I'd also tell him this. You did an awesome job with this roster, but if anything, haven't you proven that you're probably the best at doing one single roster move and then in a couple of months having it be in a really good position? So if you do it now, then worst case scenario, in the middle of the season again, your team gets fucking mega at the end and you can go into the next major, you could probably win it. Wouldn't that be cool if the story wasn't just Navi's one of the favourites and then we have to go because they're number 2 because they play against it? If we just went, because look at the fucking players. We've got Frozen, who's like the top 5 rifler in the world. You got this. That would be dope to be able to say that and to actually not have to worry about the other teams. Because I agree with you. I always worried that I need the other team to have like a mild off day or 1-star player to play bad. Then Navi will get them. It's like, I want them to be like, if we both go 10 out of 10 CS, this is why I like teams like Falcons, whether they work or not. That's why I told people for this tournament, I'm not giving up on Furia. Because like, if I look at their roster, if I could basically go in and hypnotise them and make them all play 10 out of 10 CS, that'd be a fucking amazing game. That could be a bagger final or semi-final or something. I tell you one thing I'll switch to, because this team I think we can get out the way really quickly, unfortunately. Pimp, this is why I think FUT Esports, I'm going to build this into a mini rant. This is why, if you're an analyst, we don't believe in youth. We don't. We don't believe in it. It has to be proven to us if you get the difference between those two things. It's why if you ever go back in time, I'll be totally honest, I actually tried in the first 6 months of Donk getting to the top in 2024 to actually use a lot of my podcast time to temper people's expectations. Sadly, I now feel like people took some of those narratives and ran the other way with them if they were a Donk hater. Like I did point out at Katowice, if you ever looked, he is getting set up, but they are throwing flashes for him. This clearly isn't just like, he's on his own like config style, just runs in. Like, no, like clearly there's someone who made a call and they're slowing the game down and they're giving him, he has agency as to when he peaks and stuff. But the reason I did that is because I always want people to understand that when you break out as a young player, we're only seeing your talent early on. We need to see, how do you handle the ups and downs of a game? What do you do when there's pressure? What do you do when your teammates play badly or the IGL has a shit game or something? The reason why the FUT Esports run is underwhelming to me, bro, even though, again, they also played some good teams, but I think you look at the roster, I would have had them to get out of this. I even look who they drew. I still think they should have gotten out and gotten into the playoffs. It's because, bro, you have to remember this detail, right? Of their team, only one of them, Laux, has ever played at a major, and that was actually, he was on Sprout at Rio 2022, so nobody even remembers that, but that was a million years ago when he was a baby, basically. And then the others are all rookies, and then the joke is actually the guy who performed the best. Jugs is 17 years old. The average age of the team, remember, is 19.5. So they're combining two of my least favourite things in CS as a pro. Youth and inexperience. And bro, if you watch this major, that inexperience fucking showed. Like, they had moments in this, again, they're a bit like Navi. I've never seen them play at this level, mate. In general, they've been so good the rest of the season. They really were the team every analyst I know wanted to believe in this team. You wanted to believe they were just going to come. And I always used to tell people, sadly, I think it's become a real prediction now. I used to tell people one of the beauties of FUT is they almost don't know how crazy the style they're playing is. I used to give them the analogy, in the old cartoons when Thorin was a boy, where it would be like Roadrunner, and what would happen is this, they'd always do the same gag in every cartoon. Wile E. Coyote would chase the Roadrunner out, and he already ran off the cliff, Pimp. But because he hasn't looked down, he doesn't know he's run off the cliff, so he keeps running. He's just running in the air. And we all know it's only the moment when he looks down, like, wait a minute. And then when he looks down, he realises, oh no, and then he falls, right? And the joke there is, that's what FUT did this whole season. They just ran out. They were chasing someone. They didn't even know. They were just fucking, hey, boys, what the fuck's tier 1? This is just like our FPL games and our online scrims. Let's play Mirage, just rush on the A site with AKs and shoot everyone in the head. This is a piece of piss. What are all those guys in bloody Navi and Spirit and Fury complaining about? CS is easy. I always knew I was supposed to be a top pro. And then what happens is you get to the major, mate, and suddenly you have that fear in the back of your neck, like, shit, if I lose this half, we're down in the 1-2. You have all those things going, and then all of a sudden, mate, welcome to reality. That's the bucket of water in the face, isn't it? Like, sadly, that's what everyone else has to experience, except in your case, FUT. Most people experience that at the normal lands. You had to experience it at the major, I'm afraid, mate. So I'll tell you one thing that's disturbing to me, Pimp. One, they did just play bad. Like, I was telling a lot of people, I hope this team does great. They didn't do it. And then secondly, I'll tell you one thing that's mildly disturbing me, bro. It's that interview with Laux after they got eliminated, where, like, he's making it sound like people might get, like, kicked from the team or something, bro, because he was making all weird comments about how, like, in the future, some of them will be in top 10. So he was making, there was some, like, weird ominous vibe about it, almost as though there's going to be, like, a cut. What are your thoughts on this FUT situation?
Yeah, I think you're hitting it spot on, with FUT. I think that's what happens, for a young team who unfortunately couldn't handle it, to be completely honest, because I have no doubt that when they're playing their best brand of Counter-Strike and when they're playing, fearlessly as we've seen, they are definitely good enough to be part of that playoff, and they should be beating Bedboom, to be completely honest.
Absolutely.
But the way they fell flat in that game yesterday, where it wasn't even close. It was Bedboom all the way through. Even Dust 2 at a moment got close. The Bedboom wins a force buy, I believe that is, and then that's it. That's game over. It just breaks the bone of FUT, right? They had no resilience, so to speak, and that's often what happens with young teams and young rosters. And I think the best way to illustrate that for people is just watch the way they played in stage 2. And I know the teams they were up against were a little less scary.
Oh, they were smoking people.
They were smoking people. They went 3-0. They're playing their style of Counter-Strike. They were super loud, in every round, every game. You could always hear when FUT were playing. And it was a bit more tempered, in stage 3. It's not like they didn't yell and scream and all that kind of stuff, but you could clearly feel that, there's more at stake now. Now we're getting into the real boys league. Now we're playing for the playoff. Now we're just not playing to stay part of the major. So there was a clear switch in that, which is also why they went 0-2 and had to fight their way back into the 2-2 category. And I believe in the game against, was it Bait they played when they were 0-2? Like that was a close game.
Yes.
They could have lost as well. So I agree. We never got to see the best FUT in stage 3. Thus, it's okay they didn't make the playoff. But if anything, I agree with you and what you kind of highlighted there with Longs. I don't hope that's the case, because I think this is the best experience this team could have had.
Agreed.
They would have learned so much from this stage 3. They would have learned so much that they could nurture and use for the Shanghai major. Because I have no doubt that with every player they have right now, with all the skill, with the way they play Counter-Strike, with, more and more teams probably looking to make roster change, they could continue down a path where they will still remain super competitive. And I wouldn't be surprised if at Shanghai, if they kept the same lineup, that they would be, again, a team that would contend for the playoff, maybe even be one of the favorites to make the playoff, especially now that they've gotten more experience and they've been in this position before. So there's always a lot of learning from that. So I agree with you, Am I sad FUT didn't make the playoff? I think they would have been fun to see inside the arena, but with the way they played in stage 3 and seemingly with the way the pressure got to them a little bit, I think they would have crumbled in a playoff inside Cologne, inside Langsix Arena. So in that aspect, I'm probably happy they didn't make it. And if anything, I think it's just, as you said, what is it, 19.4 or 19.5 years of age, average for that team. That's a great learning experience.
Yeah.
Stick together, guys, continue to work on it. You're still one of the most exciting teams to follow, and you've had a fantastic season and a breakthrough that no one thought would be possible from the beginning of the season. So I don't hope this is a case where some of those players are getting poached, or NAVI comes knocking on FUT store, or have a buyback clause that we don't know about for some of the players and whatnot, because that would suck. Another point as well, for Longs, I feel like he was unfortunately the player that underperformed the most, and he was the one experience item you had, and I think that was a bit of an issue as well, because you don't need a team where all 5 players have experience. You just need a couple of players who can keep everyone in check. Yeah. But when you're one guy who has a little bit experience from the Rio Major is also the guy struggling the most individually, then that experience goes out of the window, because all of a sudden now he's just focused on himself, trying to get back on his normal level. So I think it was a little bit unfortunate for FUT, but honestly, it hasn't changed my perspective. It hasn't changed how much I like watching them play. And again, you're losing a 2-2 game. Sure, it was against Bedboom. Sure, it wasn't pretty, but there's nothing to be ashamed about. You're still a young team, and maybe you shouldn't even be in the playoff, considering where you're at right now. So I'm still excited for them if they stick together.
No, I'm with you. I also actually just hope the roster stays together. It's one of those rare cases where I don't want people to get picked off, even though if I was also advising many teams out there, Liquid, fucking FaZe, maybe even G2, I would definitely look at this team and see if you can just buy a player. Like, if you're Liquid and you're really sick of the Shuhei experiment, buy Krabbenny, mate. Just get that guy, pop him in your team. If you're someone like FaZe Clan, surely you want someone like Jugs, you know what I mean? So that's exactly right up your alley. That could be your Rops replacement. That could be the player that you could come in and put there. So no, I think there's so much talent in the team, but I also think if you just learn from this experience, you could be mega by the next one, though. Again, think how many more lands you'll have an experience of. Hopefully, you've been in a bunch more arenas, maybe even like win a LAN if everything comes together. So by the next team, also at the next major, you will also be slightly older and slightly more experienced. So yeah, I'm with you. I hope they keep the roster together personally. I also do think as well, like, This is. I agree with what you said at the end there. This is why youth can be good, but you want to balance it out. You don't want like 4 rookies to a major. And by the way, Laux may as well be a rookie to a major. He wasn't a major with a team that couldn't have done anything all those years ago. That was when he was a baby. So normally you want 1 or 2 rookies. You can work with that. You can't have the whole team be rookies, guys. So they got it out of the system now. They got it out of the system now.
Yeah, I'll give you the best example, in terms of football and that analogy. Like, look at Chelsea, where they're at right now. Like, I'm a Chelsea fan. I've been a Chelsea fan my entire life. It hasn't been the same since Eden Hazard stopped. But the new owners had a clear strategy within Chelsea.
Yeah.
They wanted to buy youth, they wanted to buy talent, and they bought talent, they bought youth, and they brought more youth in, and then they brought a little bit more youth in, and then they didn't re-sign with Thiago Silva, in the defense, and they brought a little bit more youth in, and all of a sudden we have so much talent, but nowhere to go with that talent. It's such a promising squad in a lot of different positions, but there's no one to show them the way, And I think the same could be said here for FUT, and the same could be applied to a lot of different sports. It doesn't have to be football. It can be Counter-Strike. It can probably be League of Legends, I'd assume, as well, without playing nor watching that game. But you need something to balance it out, And I think Chelsea remains as the perfect example, as in it doesn't matter how much raw, good talent you bring in. It will be exciting to a certain degree, but if you wanted to perform and actually win stuff and contend for trophies, you got to balance it out with a bit of experience. So there's only one way of doing that. That's by giving the youth more experience, by then sticking together if you're FUT, or by bringing in an experienced element to that team. And I'll be honest, it's probably going to be tough for FUT to acquire someone, that fits that profile. That also will be an upgrade to whatever you then were to remove from the team. So in this case, I'd say just stick together and build together and move forward. FUT is also a new organization, don't have a rich history in Counter-Strike. There's no outside pressure. Whereas if you take the Chelsea example, right, I guess the fans' ambition for the club and my ambitions for the club is to be title contenders pretty much every single year. I want to be in Europe every single year. I have certain expectations just based on the fact that you're Chelsea. Whereas for FUT, they kind of have the pass of just doing this slowly but surely, in a sense. They don't have to necessarily be great now. They can stick together and gain that experience over time, and maybe become a new top club, in essence. So I think it's a very valid point, and it's something I wish again, if we had more time on this segments, it's something I'd like to dive into. How do certain teams actually balance out the experience versus the youth? Because there's also a case to be made, and I had that conversation with Stuco and Dupree, I think, where I asked the question, is like, a lot of experience is great, but at what point does experience not matter anymore? Like, if you have 4 experienced players or 3 experienced players, does it actually matter? Or would you rather have some McCarthy raw energy youth inside your lineup that is keeping the old guard to the fire, so to speak? Because I think there's also, a balance that goes the other way around, where you can have too much experience, where you can have too many players who, like, look at FaZe, where it's just, okay, we all have a lot of experience. We all know exactly what to do and how to act, but there's no fire, there's no belief, there's no extra motivation all of a sudden. So it goes both ways, and it's interesting. But for FUT's case, stick together, gain that experience by continuing to doing well. And, if things go as I think they will during this offseason, NAVI could change. I think there's still a couple of the teams in the playoff who could change. And that should give, FUT an even better chance of making deep playoff runs at the PGL tournaments, at Blast, at upcoming Pro League, you name it.
Because on the other side, I'll actually use that as a segue. I actually think what karrigan is doing in Falcons is a perfect example of where, like, experience is valuable. Because first of all, I have a concept I came up with, funnily enough, from League of Legends. Because believe it or not, in League of Legends, if people don't know MOBA type games, because they include the idea that everyone has a distinct role. If people don't know, Dota 2, you can actually be a little bit more, you're more this type of offlaner and not such a hard spot. In League of Legends, you're all just one of the 5 roles, basically, and it's a bit more stratified, and every team has exactly those 5 roles, because there's like essentially different components to the game. You play the lane first, then you play, like, you move around the map, then you have the objectives, etc. In that game, I often used to say there's a big difference between being really talented and having skill in the game. Like, you can play your character, you can get, like, you can farm the CS, you can hit the enemy, but there's a big difference between the players that I always say, like, the class of player I want on my team is the one where I describe them as they know how to win the game. So in League of Legends, that means that, macro concepts, and you understand, it's like, if when you go to those high level job interviews, you hear stories that you get assigned a problem for, like, a coding or something. How would you solve this issue here? And the point is, if you know your stuff, you can explain, like, I'd approach it this way, and I'd break it down that. The point is, if you were to ask a great player in Counter-Strike, no matter what their skill level is, karrigan's a great example, because right now he's having some of the worst fragging ever seen in the history of Counter-Strike. The difference is, though, one thing you can't argue with is karrigan knows how to win Counter-Strike games, though. You even see it in these matches. Like, if you ever watch him play, he's still, if people don't know, there's a lot of people out there who must be really fucking glad karrigan's getting his head banged in, because I think of some of the IGLs out there, like the Hunters of this world, that aren't playing all the sacrificial roles. They aren't the human flashbang, mate. They're just having games where they fucking chew here. They're just having some games where they just frag bad, mate. And then they don't even do the great call and don't bring it. If you look at it, right, first of all, one of the things people maybe have missed, I saw this stat online, like, the old Falcons actually had some record. They were like 1-4 or 1-5 if they went to OT. The karrigan karrigan Falcons is 6-1 if they go to overtime, bro. They just win all these sessions, which I have to say, if you don't see that as night and day to the old fact, holy fuck. And then the obvious angle to me as well as this, you know, when people go, yeah, but in history, no one's ever won Thorin without a certain rating. Boys, let's flash forwards a year in the future. If I then said a piece of trivia, do you know the only IGL to ever frag below this level and win a major was karrigan when he had Prime Monacy, Nico was still pretty good, and Kiyosuke, you'd go, well, that makes sense, he'd be the one, wouldn't he? Like, the point is, that'd be a weirder question if I said Shuhei did it on this liquid, and you know, then you'd be like, what? Holy shit. So, like, I want to know where people are this Falcons one, because I've heard people, the whole tournament, by the way, so far, it's just been about karrigan's fragging. Every fucking tweet's about it. It's about, is he going to break the record? Every topic's like, he's just not good enough for this. But then I keep watching it. They keep winning games. They just keep winning these fucking games. And like we just said, they just beat the NAVI. We all just praised the whole season long. Like, they're in these matches. They beat G2s. The playoff team was a little run here. There's a bunch of games they've won here. So I want to know, where is Pimp at on the Falcons thing? And obviously, yeah, we've mentioned many times, in fact, it was your topic for the last year or so, put fucking karrigan on Falcons. Are you concerned that his fragging is bad? Will it make it impossible to win the major? What do you think?
Yeah, I think, I'll be completely honest, I think it is a concern, and I think everyone should be concerned about it, but it doesn't mean that it can't be successful with it changing. You know, I agree with you, you know, in terms of the resilience, winning overtime games. You know, that game against NAVI, I think that was a prime example of a game that old Falcons would never have won. They would have crumbled at some point in those overtimes or leading into it, never made the comeback. You know, the calling from karrigan, T-side Anubis, obviously helped by it's the fact that it's T-side Anubis, but it was great calling, you know, and it was a great way of, you know, if you dive into it, the way he was setting the pace, playing fast, playing slow. Yes. NAVI had no idea what was coming, you know, very good at masking what was coming every single round. So in that regard, you really saw the true value of karrigan. But I also think that he, after that game, was being very honest with the desk when they interviewed, saying that he's concerned about, like, he's aware that it's an issue that he's playing poorly. And if he says that out loud, then I think everyone has the right to be concerned as well, because you're kind of poking one of my weaknesses here, because I can't help to think, but what if he actually just played normal? I know. What if karrigan was back to a 0.85 rating, which is, by the way, not unheard of, you know, to require from a player of his caliber. It's very doable. It's just a couple of percentage better, you know, a couple of, just a little bit, you know, give us a little bit more, because then Falcons may be a team that instead of going into overtime against NAVI, they just beat them outright. Instead of struggling against G2 in a game where they end up beating them, they'll just beat them outright. Instead of maybe not beating, you know, let's say Vitality in the quarterfinal at the major playoff, maybe they have a chance of actually beating them in a game where Vitality is also playing well. So I think it's, to me, I don't know if it's a concern, it's more so a what if, what it could be, you know, if he actually stepped up just a little bit, if he went back to the karrigan of a year and a half ago, you know, because let's be honest, it's the thing that concerns me is that last year he was poor, this year he's even worse off. Yes. So it's trending downwards. Yes. And we're at a point now where you can discuss whether you think it's an issue or whether it's too much, you know. I think Maurice made it pretty clear that he thinks it's way too much. I'm on the cusp of that as well. I'm leaning towards that side right now. But one thing is for certain, and no one can, I don't think that's a conversation where it cannot get any worse. So if it keeps trending downwards, and if it keeps getting worse than it is right now, then it's not a question whether it's a problem. Then it is an outright massive issue that needs to be sorted. And it doesn't matter how good of a caller he is. It doesn't matter how much of a he can have from that point, because you cannot win Counter-Strike games in 2026 consistently being playing 4v5. So I think, to me, that's probably the more interesting conversation of the two. It's the what if he actually came back and was just a little bit better, and also the what if the trending continued downwards. Then at some point, you know, regardless of how much he inspires Kyusuk and how much he brings good vibes into the team, you know, Nico and Monacy and Sonic, for that matter, will get to a point where, like, you literally have to call us every round to a win, otherwise we're playing 4v5, and that's not sustainable for the long term. So yeah, I don't know. I think the playoff could be freaking interesting, and the game against Vitality could be super interesting if you could tell me karrigan would perform just 10% better, because then I think they have an outright chance of beating Vitality in a straight game where it doesn't require Vitality to have a bad game, or it doesn't require Saibu to have a game off. I think there's enough within the Falcons camp to actually beat them head-to-head in a proper game of Counter-Strike, but it does require Falcons, and in particular karrigan, not to be struggling as much as he has as of late.
No, I'm with you. My problem is, it's not like it's impossible he could just play the level he was last year. And if he does that, by the way, this team could win loads of trophies. Like, they look so fucking stacked because they're already getting over the line in all these games anyway, even with all-time universally unbelievably bad fragging. Like, if people don't know, those 2 events where they made the finals when he just joined Falcons, he was doing like 0.4 KPR, and they were like in the finals of these events and beating top teams. And in fact, now if you go and look, the only team they haven't beaten is they haven't beaten Spirit and they haven't played Vitality with this new squad. So, like, those are the 2 best teams right now. Like, actually, that implies even with this level, it might actually be possible to be the guy who breaks the record and wins even with the fucking worst stats ever. And I'm with you. If he ever turns around, bro, like, I made that joke, like, that's God's way of showing that he actually cares about us, because if karrigan could actually frag decently, wouldn't he just win all the trophies for the last like 5 years? He'd just have everything, wouldn't he? So in a way, that's what evens it out to some degree. Because I do think one thing that is real, mate, is I understand that in interviews you're going to do your best to hype the new guy up and all that. The way that they're all doing it though, bro, sometimes these Falcons players aren't even asked about that specific part of karrigan. They all mention that, like, it's real. They've all bought in. They actually believe they're going to win these games because he's there. Like, I told you, this is the thing that was so cool about the FaZe era. I think it was really karrigan. It wasn't only like you needed players like Rops to do amazing shit. Broke, you had to do crazy things. Twists obviously won that Cologne for them, didn't they? Like, there's moments where the players did the shit, but that crazy ambience of like anything's possible, that actually comes from playing with karrigan. Because as you saw in the game you're talking about, if no one knows what the game Pimp's referencing, NAVI had them completely banged to rights on the Anubis that NAVI's looked good on recently. And basically, karrigan just called like it was a fucking pug, but some of the most beautiful, like, up-tempo fucking hits you'll ever see. And the way he set them up, I agree with you. They weren't just all from spawn, bro. It was when the timings were. NAVI couldn't react to it. They couldn't do shit against it. It was actually, essentially, it really was just some, like, power Counter-Strike. You were just running on the sites with, like, one-man advantage or making, like, an even fight, and you would just win it every time. Like, that's so... No Falcons without karrigan ever played like that, bro. Never in a million years. They'd have played more nervous and more conservative, and then they'd have made, like, Nico take a really hard shot or something, or put Monty in a 1v3. They never would. So the interesting thing to me is, look, the major's going to be over really quick if any of these things we're saying are a problem. They're playing Vitality, not the number 1 team that's supposed to beat them. But I'll tell you what, mate, we've been waiting for this the whole fucking time. Even the Kicksand Falcons was one of the only teams, I believe, because I don't think it's just them. I also think they're one of the only teams that when Vitality plays, this is where fans are different from pros. If you ask a fan, they'll go, lol, if I'm Vitality, I'd love to play Falcons. They all choke and they're not good enough and karrigan's not fragging. I'll tell you right now, if you went and asked Apex, Zwu, Rops, they'd tell you, oh, I don't want to fucking play a team like that. Like, what if they have a good day? What if Nico, by the way, has a good day who everyone's laughing at and saying chokes? You've just seen, like, he could just drop like a 30 bomb on our heads and he's not even their best player. If Modesty ever actually outperforms Zwu, we're in fucking trouble. And if karrigan actually does cause some magical rounds, fuck, that's not what we want. We'd rather someone else took care of them and we're playing G2 or 9Z or some shit like that, or almost anyone, quite frankly. So I do think the opening match is spicy as fuck, especially because, I'm just going to throw this out there, bro, I actually think this is exactly the kind of scenario where if you are karrigan, you do some bullshit like pick Anubis or some absurd, you know what I mean? Just do something where, again, you're trying to fuck with them, do some mind game shit. Because at this point, actually, even though everyone says the pressure's on them to win the major and all that jazz, I do sort of think it is still the 3rd event they've had him in the team, you know, like, that's why they even also point, they haven't figured all the shit out. Like, in a weird way, it's actually one of the only matches I think you can look at for Falcons and say, don't worry about the result, just go for it, just send it, let's see what can happen. If it was anyone else, I'd say you have to win this quarter. This is the one quarter surely nobody has to win. It's Vitality, bro.
Yeah, and I just to follow up on that point, because I very much agree, you know, the whole karrigan coming into this game against Vitality, what makes it even more spicy is a situation that we never have at any other Tier 1 tournament. The last time Falcons played was Sunday. They knew that they were playing Vitality yesterday, which means that he has 4 days. They only play Friday, right? Because obviously it's the most exciting quarterfinal, so it's the last quarterfinal on Friday. They have 4 days to prepare for that. 4 days of practice at an event like this. You can prepare a map like Anubis, or you can prepare a punish pick like that.
They famously did it on the Vertigo at Copenhagen. That's what they apparently did in those days off,
Exactly. So it's not that you can, like, naturally at any tournament you can do that, but it comes with a lot more risk and a lot more uncertainty. But if you're hyper-focused on, okay, listen, we sit down Monday night or Tuesday morning and we agree that this is the map we're going to pick. Let's prepare a couple of surprises for Vitality to mess them up on our own map pick. You actually have time to do that now. You have time to drive on it. You have time to practice it. You try to have time to test it against other teams in practice. Normally, you don't have that luxury when you're at a tournament. So I think that's also another factor that's going to help Falcons a lot. Because at the end of the day, as you said, you know, they are they are the underdogs against Vitality. If you're Vitality, you don't want to change too much. Sure, you can also come up with a couple of surprises and, renew your playbook a little bit and make sure that you can mask some of your defaults and some of your strats a little bit more. And that's something I think FlameC has really praised Apex for doing, that almost every single tournament, he feels like they get better during the tournament because Apex and Exodus always comes up with something new. So it goes both ways. But when you're the underdog and you have 4 days off to prepare for a game like this, that's a massive advantage that you normally don't get at any tier 1 tournament, because at best you have 1 day off, maybe 2, where you don't even know your opponent, right? But here we have 4 days where Falcons knew they were going to play Vitality. So I think that makes it even more likely that it's going to be an interesting veto first and foremost, but also an interesting quarterfinal where the normal dynamics of that game may be put aside just a little bit. So that's something to look out for and something to get excited about, that just because there's been certain tendencies or certain maps or certain expectations attached to, Falcons versus Vitality. Same goes for G2 Spirit. Same goes for basically all the quarterfinals. I think stuff like this can change during a major when there is 3 days off where everyone have time to prepare, redefine details, maybe bring a punish pick map into the mix because they've had time to prepare that as well. So that's something I'll make sure to bring it up on the desk, of course, and explore more. But I think for people at home, don't be too certain that you know it all, because I think a lot of these teams have the ability to change on the fly, and now that they have time to actually practice. And just to furthermore expand on that point, when the tournaments are back to back to back to back, you're lucky if you as a team have 3 days at home to practice going into the next tournament. So if you have 3 days of practice for the major, hyper-focused bootcamp environment, things can change. If you don't think chains are able to be major, I guess, in 3 days' time, then you don't believe that teams can practice in between tournaments in Tier 1 Counter-Strike, because that's roughly the same time frame they have to practice in between travels and tournaments. So be careful with that.
Right, I'm going to joke here, but I'm going to make it seem real, right? Obviously, Volvo, Gabe Newell, and DSL all want Fallen to continue playing into 2027, because this bracket, bro, looks like Operation Keep Fallen, because on paper, on this bracket, you're supposed to be in the fight. This is even more ridiculous than the last one. The last one at least had NAVI, if you remember. This one, the side of the bracket, they played 9Z, first of all. By the way, that's a match you could have at a local fucking tournament in South America. If Fury attended those tournaments, they don't. Then the semi-final is the winner of Aurora and Bet Boom. Boys, I could put those two teams into an average PGL and they wouldn't make the final. Like, I actually think if you look at this, if you're Furia, look, you have done what I hoped you would do, which is you play a bit better. You play up to the roster. People forget about the fucking season. Who cares? If you have a roster like this, you go into the major and you always think you have a chance to win. The key thing is a chance. You don't think you're favourites. You don't think you play best, but you just go, you know what? It'll take it a game at a time. When we play against any good team here, if we all play our game, Keserato pops off, Molodoy's doing all the sick shit, it's possible. It's always possible. Mate, it's not just possible. This bracket means they should be in the final. That would even be interesting in itself, because I'll tell you one thing I've learned, Pimp. One of the reasons why, even though it's sort of true, like, put it this way, if Vitality and Spirit meet in the other semi-finals, we'll all do that line we always do. This is the real major final. And in a way it is, because winning that match is the hardest match, right? But I'll tell you why sometimes it isn't the real major final. Because also, in a weird way, if the other team doesn't get challenged and they just easily walk to the final, it doesn't take as much out of you. You don't take those psychic blows. You don't show everything even. You know what I mean? Sometimes in a weird way, it's almost like you get to reserve your power level, and then you just have to have, all you have to do is have one epic game in the final. Navi showed it in Copenhagen. One epic series can win you the whole fucking tournament. I tell you what, mate, if I was Fallen and City, the coach of Fat Furia, I'd be literally saying that to my team in these matches, like, guys, listen, we're going to take every match one at a time. We'll just get through these first two. Then you know what? It doesn't even matter if we play Vitality, mate. Maybe they are the best team ever. It doesn't matter in this one game. If in this one game we're better, we're major champions. We've done it. Like, isn't this our whole dream? Like, suddenly, like, this bracket draw alone should just give them so much more belief you could win the major now, mate.
100%. They kind of get the reward for going 3-0, where it feels like Spirit got fucked by going 3-0, in some sense, So that's a bit unfortunate if you're on the Spirit side of things. But I agree. And what makes me even more excited about it is it's a Furia playing well, as you said. It's Yakinda having a great group stage. It's Furia being pretty convincing in their games without, I'm not willing to say they played as well as they did, coming into the 25 major in Budapest, but they're getting there, It seemingly looks better. And now we get to see against 9C and potentially against Aurora Bet Boom in a semi-final, if that's the truth. Because you're right, anything but a grand final here for Furia would be disappointing. And I know the team is going to come out and say, yeah, we respect everyone, and everyone who's in the playoff is a good team, and no major semi-final has ever been easy. But every single player within Inferior, every single staff member within Inferior, they're looking at that bracket thinking to themselves, fuck yeah, that is so nice. We're so blessed, for that one, even though they don't want to say it out loud because that could be disrespectful or that could change focus or whatnot. So it's also a bit of an exercise for the Inferior players to stay focused, and as you said, trust in City and take one game at a time, because on a bad day, 9C can beat Furia. And if Furia is having a bad day against Aurora and Bedboom, they can definitely beat them. But that's the kind of silver lining right here. No one should be allowed to have a bad day in the major playoff and move further. But I think Furia can get away with it. I think Furia can get away with playing a 7 out of 10 game against 9C and still win. I think Furia can get away with playing, at 80% against Aurora, Bedboom potentially and still get into the grand final. Whereas if you're Spirit, G2, Falcons or Vitality, unless you're playing your best brand of Counter-Strike, forget about the grand final. Forget about moving on. So in that essence, you're right in saying there's a great likelihood that's going to happen, and maybe they come a bit more rested into the grand final. It made me think, and I don't know if this is the right time to do it, but Swiss is great. The format is great, but I hate the fact that we kind of rely on it for the major bracket to also play out in a fashion that doesn't screw it up. Because there was also a world where I can't remember what the exact matchups had to be. I think the Mongols had to win their game against was that 9C, and then NAVI beating G2. Then you would have NAVI, Spirit, Falcons, and Vitality in one side of the bracket, and then the rest. So
it would be the top 4 teams in the world. Yeah.
Top 4 teams in the world, which would have been ridiculous, right? Yep. So I was thinking to myself and theory crafting, how do we avoid that? Is there a way where you can use that system and then, I don't know, have a fancy creative way of saying, okay, the 2-3-0 teams, they get to pick their opponents, they get to pick the 0-3 teams. The 2-3 teams they want to face. And then you go into the minor details. Okay, so with both 3-0s, who get to pick first? Well, that you could use the book score for. Whoever had the hardest way to go 3-0 then gets to be the first pickers.
Yes. And I can tell you this does exist in other games. Like what they tend to do instead is in League of Legends, they do this in Korean League of Legends, for example. What they do is that's the way in the regular season they reward you for being number one. If you're number one, you not only get to skip around in their system, but the number one team gets to pick which of the teams that win the round before they play, so they can make it slightly easier for them. Oh, they can. By the way, one time, I won't mention it, one time a few years ago, a team for revenge purposes picked a really strong team and then lost, which was hilarious. But the point is, in theory, every time it would make the bracket fairer because the number one team would just pick the easiest opponent. Yeah.
That's the thing, yeah. It would make it quote unquote more fair, and it would make it more interesting, and there'd be a story to okay, they picked this team, why did they pick that team? And then as I said, I know when two teams go 3-0, it may seem unfair that one team gets to pick before the other, but is it more unfair than what's happening now? That Spirit goes 3-0 and gets fucked by the bracket and the book goal score, or is it more fair that they actually got to choose their opponent? So I think that would be a fun way of maybe altering a bit with the format, but then again, it's a major, right? So it's probably not going to happen. But then I would urge that for PGL. PGL are running a lot of cool tournaments with the Swiss format. If anything, test it out at the PGL tournaments, make it even more spicy. Make it so that you get to pick your opponent in the playoff and add another layer to that, add a story to that, proof test the concept, see how it works out. And then maybe, as we know with Valve, it takes 2 or 3 years before they realize, but then eventually they'll pick it up like they picked up a best of 5 grand final for MR12. So I think that'll be a way of doing it, because there's also a world where the bracket would have turned out just perfectly and we wouldn't be having this conversation, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't seem to happen often though, mate. There seems to be a lot of majors with the stacked side of the bracket, if you notice. It's happened quite a few times now. And karrigan's always on the stacked side for some reason. Have you noticed that?
There's that too, which I think, ironically enough, that's a good thing for Falcons. I think Yanko said it. I had a conversation with Yanko where he said, that's the perfect bracket for Falcons. The harder it is, the better. Yep. And I low-key agree. If Falcons face 9C in the first game, they'd find a way to lose.
Oh, great.
I'm almost willing to say they have a better chance against beating Vitality, which is ridiculous.
No, by the way, I actually think that is true. Also, we haven't got much time, so let's do a couple of quick hits. We obviously still need to talk a little bit about Spirit and Vitality. So here's my question for you, right, is what is Pimp's expectation for Spirit? Does Spirit win the major?
No, fuck yeah. They beat G2, I think. But no, I don't. I think not having a coach is going to turn to be an issue in the playoff. I don't think, again, controlled environment, group states, I think they can get away with it. The game against 9C, they should have lost, to be fair. They shouldn't have won that game. They should have probably gone 3-1. So I think they've shown me that on a bad day or on a normal Spirit day, because let's be honest, what they've shown so far at the major has been way above what we've seen all season long. I don't think they'll win the major. Can they win the major? Sure. If they pick up, again from where they left in the group stage and in stage 2, and if Dong is going back to having a 1.9 average rating, then I can't say they can't win the major. But not having a coach behind them, when the game is 11-11, and everything is rumbling in the stadium, everything is at stake. You have Magic's going into a major playoff for the first time as an in-game leader. I think there's more pointing towards no than towards yes, but it's not impossible for them to win based on the fact they have Dunk, and he's just ridiculous.
My problem is that they're also a kind of a bit like the Falcons equation, where it's like, in theory, they can do it, certainly, yeah. I mean, you've already seen glimpses of it here. But
especially if Falcons beat Vitality, then that becomes more likely, right? Yeah.
But my biggest problem is, like, even then, mate, they could also just fuck up a final against a Fury or something like that. That's the other issue, because my main issue is this, right? First of all, at this tournament, Tenere hasn't actually played very well, even though the rest of the team's smurfed. So that's one concern. And then the other one is, look, it's a classic one if you've ever followed these teams over the years. Shiro just plays worse in playoffs, bro. And so, look, if those two players play well, it's not often that happens at the same time in the playoffs. They can beat anyone. It'd be unplayable. That's why, in a weird way, whenever I get to the playoff, I always just hope for one thing at major playoffs. I wish every team could just play the best CS. And then let's just see who wins. That would make it a lot easier, wouldn't it? Instead of like, does this player turn up? Can they do this? What if they get pushed on this? I wish everyone could just play 10 out of 10. Then at the end, we just see what happens. But to be fair, that's not the nature of the game, is it? So I do think, put it this way, there's a reason why. Like, I did it like in true Thorin fashion. I did it like right after only the Rio result. I did do a hot take on Hot Take Point made that like Spirit wins the major, but that was more the reason it was a good hot take is it's because theoretically it's possible. And so actually my pick, like spoiler, we'll just go to the last one now. We'll hit it. I figured we didn't need that much time. After everything, after all the ups and downs, it reminds me of last major, mate, because it's easy for me. I'm loving it when I'm seeing people pick Spirit on. I'm sure all Brazilian fans have to have taken Fury. Again, you need to win one of BL3, basically, to win the whole fucking thing, potentially. All these, I doubt any Falcons believers really picked Falcons, but maybe they did. Mate, I love just being able to go, you know what? Vitality, they win the major. That's easy. Locking in my picks. Like, it feels like the freest pick of all time. Like, the problem is, mate, even when they've had the odd game here that was dodgy, notice how many times they still won. Right, that's the difference. One thing Vitality has that I don't think any team in Counter-Strike has right now is, I said earlier that like Falcons is grinding out results. The point there is, I think if karrigan's calling really well, he just has a problem fragging. The thing about the Vitality is, I also think that they have that game, bro, where, like you saw the events when they were in America, they can play a 7 out of 10 CS for Vitality and beat almost anyone in CS. Like, and if they ever turn up 10 out of 10, boys, this shit's over. Like, I think they really, I have them winning again. And if you're watching in the future, you'll think this is boring. It was obvious. Actually, everyone's hyped now. People really believe these matches.
Yeah.
Like they're also a team that could have been upset a fucking couple of times in this major. It didn't happen though because they're just too fucking good. Pip, I have to take them to win. They've just still got every factor I want. They got the map pool. They've got the star players. They've got. By the way, they even still have that thing I think is dope as fuck. They actually are still hungry. I don't know how they do it because I think the real miracle in Vitality, if we go 2 years in the future, is it happened already with Astralis. Is people are going to start asking questions like, how did they psychologically stay in? Like, what was the coaching structure? People are going to mythologize this team because they're just too special, bro. I have to take them to win.
Yeah, I think everyone agrees with you. And everyone agrees with you in the sense that, the betting odds and the poly market odds and all the kind of, they changed as well. I think they started with a 60% chance of winning the major. Now they're down to 40. So people have changed their mind, in terms of how much they believe in Vitality. Let me just remind you that as you also highlighted and said right here, they have lost or played games against teams that they should be banging out in group stage before just to go into the playoff and then be untouchable, like absolutely untouchable. I can't. Was it IMVU when the ESL Grand Slam was on the line? They almost and should have lost the game against G2 playing with
TAC
on the server. TAC, sorry, playing with the
academy player. Yep.
There we go. And didn't they play against FUT as well, where they lost a map to Coolio or something like that during?
I think that was Blast Rivals, but the one after that, yes.
Blast Rivals, right? So it's. Let me just remind people that what they've done here at the group stage at the major was no worse than what they did at IEM Rio and no worse than what they did at Blast Rivals or Atlanta for that matter as well. So it's again, when you summarize the tournament and you know the result that Vitality then go into the playoff, they win the tournament, they smash out their position in the playoff, then you're like, yeah, we don't care about what happened in the group stage. But all of a sudden now you care about what happened in the group stage because you're living in the moment, right? So if history proves us anything, is that Vitality in a playoff is just a serious and much different team and a much different unit than Vitality in a group stage. They've shown that, over the course of 3 or 4 tournaments already. So why wouldn't that be the case here? Like what should point in the direction or what should make me believe that that's not going to be the case here for Vitality? Is because I'm completely with you. I think Vitality will win the major and it seems obvious to say. But given that according to bettors or according to people who put their money where their mouth is, that their chances are down 33% from when the major started. I think that's a pretty big drop off. I think there's a lot of belief lost in Vitality based on the fact that they performed in the group stage like they have in pretty much every single fucking group stage at this year where they've actually had something to play for. So it hasn't changed shit for me. I think Vitality, the worst game they're going to play is the quarterfinal. If they survive Falcons, they win the major. I think that's the only quote-unquote losable game for them. I don't think they're going to lose to Spirit. I don't think they'll lose to G2 if they magically get them in a semifinal. And I don't think they'll blow off a best-of-5 grand final against 9C, Furia, Aurora, or Bedboom, regardless of how well those teams are playing. So the biggest danger to me is Vitality versus Falcons. That's the one game I could see them lose.
No, by the way, I agree with you. This has happened during the season. People forget. So if you remember early in the season, when they dominated, the stat was that they used to win every single map in the playoffs, if you remember. But they used to have tons of close. They had a close game against Paravision at Blast Rotterdam. They had a bunch of games they were in, and teams had definitely won maps. And as the season went on, I used to tell people this. Everyone would overreact to a group stage loss or almost loss. And then I would always just say, you do know in like a week after the finals, we're all just going to say the same thing. Like, they're unbeatable, the series shit. No one can play them. It's like, but we're all getting caught up in that one game where they almost lost, but they didn't is the key thing. So I'm with you. They win the major. We'll be back next week.